Hello and welcome to another Tippling Philosopher video. It's been a long time and I thought I would talk to you about something very topical because, as pretty much the entire world knows, we are in the throes of a pandemic. So coronavirus has wreaked havoc on the world and we are all looking very closely at science and data and looking to see what will happen and the impact it will have on our lives and our families and people that we know and people that we don't know. And it is hugely impactful and hugely out of the blue in a sense. We 3 months ago, unless you're in deep in Hubei and Wuhan, you didn't really know this was going on, and now it's a thing, and it's a major thing. And in fact, on my blog, I've been writing countless articles on the subject of the coronavirus, and it's something that has really interested me. But rather than dwell on the politics of the whole thing, and believe me, the politics is hugely interesting no matter what country you live in, but particularly in the States, where we are seeing, presently a leader who is not really leading, who has started by almost denying the whole thing and then changing his mind and taking his own pet media sources with him, and now denying things and accepting other things. And I don't know. I'm not getting into the politics of it because I would have a 5 hour long video where I'd just be shouting. So this is going to concentrate broadly on philosophy and the philosophy of morality. So living in these times of moral dilemma, I've often talked before that politics is a subset of morality. So when we talk about morality, we talk often about oughts, what we ought to do normatively, what we should as individuals do, right? And politics is that writ large onto society, onto multiple people, talking about governmental sort of perspectives and policy making that affects the individual, but it's what the government should do. So it's still a case of a moral ought, just on a much larger scale. And in these times of governmental action, in light of a life-threatening pandemic, we discuss whether, reaction A for a government is better than reaction B. Option A is better than option B. So, and I've said this many times before, but it appears that consequentialism is at play here. Now, what is consequentialism? So very quickly, in terms of moral philosophy, consequentialism is a moral value system whereby you derive moral value from the consequences of an action. So this is famously illustrated in the trolley experiment, the thought experiment, whereby you have a train track with a trolley going down it out of control, and it's going to kill 5 people as it rams into 5 people on the track. Now you have a choice whether you can pull a lever so you can divert the trolley and it only goes down, it goes down a track where it only kills 1 person, or you can do nothing and allow the trolley to continue to kill 5 people. What would you do? And it turns out that most people, sort of variously, somewhere around 89% of people or something like that, would choose to pull the lever whereby you divert the trolley to kill 1 person as opposed to 5. It's a moral calculation of the consequences of your action or inaction. So that's that kind of moral value system, very briefly. Now, there are so many different varieties of consequentialism that it gets quite technical, but broadly speaking, that's the simple definition. Now, people who believe in God, theists, don't really like consequentialism because you don't need a God to have your moral value system. You are really looking at the consequences of an action in terms of the tangible ramifications on whatever and whomever. And therefore, you don't really need a God to work out those calculations. God is superfluous to that moral value system, and therefore theists don't like it. They can't have God underwriting a moral value system. So So consequentialism, therefore, as according to people like William Lane Craig, is a terrible ethic. So we have this really interesting situation where it appears that most people intuitively like consequential or use consequentialism. When you start introducing ideas of psychology, it starts getting quite interesting and complicated, and you can change that trolley experiment so that actually you reverse those percentages of who would pull the lever or not. But if we keep psychology aside for now, just in a pure rational calculation, thought experiment, consequentialism is fairly utilized by, or broadly is utilized by most humans. So what's interesting is that in the present political climate, you have a lot of right-wing, say Republican people in America who claim that they are, fully God-believing, God-fearing Christians, who will say consequentialism is a terrible ethic because you don't need God to underwrite your morality. So therefore, we hate consequentialism. But they appear to be using consequentialism to argue for certain policies over and above other policies. So in America at the moment, we have a situation where the president appears to want to allow the wheels of the economy to keep moving. He seems to want to put the economy over and above everything else. So where he's got option A and option B, we might say option one and option two. So option one might be shut down movement and isolate people in order to stop the spread of the disease and to save millions of lives, as according to all the modelling and science that we can get our hands on. The reason why everyone is isolated with coronavirus is because the more you meet people, the more you spread the disease, the more you spread the disease, the more people will die, broadly speaking. So you stop people moving and that will save lives. The problem is you stop people moving, the economy comes to a standstill and you go into a recession, you lose lots of money. So we have this interesting dilemma. Do you stop people moving and screw the economy over, or in order to save millions of lives? Or you do option two, do you do the option that keeps the economy functioning, or in the language of Trump at the moment, he's wanting to reopen the economy to get those wheels moving and allow free or slightly limited movement of people and businesses so that they can remain functioning as normally as possible. So here we have two options. And now imagine you're a politician. How do you evaluate these two options? One, isolate people. Two, don't isolate people and carry on as normal. The only metric you can appear to really use would be one of consequentialism, whereby you are calculating the effect of one over the effect of another on using some kind of metric. And it might be that, for example, if you isolate people, you might calculate that millions of people won't die, and therefore there's a value to human life. Since if we devalued life, and this is a further level of consequentialism, if we devalued life, society would be unworkable, including for ourselves. If we all went through life just thinking human life is not worth anything, then people would be dying left, right, and centre. You could have no workable society. You'd have mass deaths, and there would be illnesses through coronavirus because you wouldn't necessarily value human life. So yeah, whatever. So we don't do that. We isolate people because we value human life. And then you have this other sort of consequential ramification whereby if loads of people did die because you didn't isolate them, then you couldn't have a workable economy anyway, and it will fall down, and the quality and standard of life would fall with it. So you isolate people in order to stop that happening. Option two, which appears to be the preferred intention of Donald Trump and people of his ilk, which is keeping the economy functioning so you could have a strong economy that remains competitive globally. You can raise income through taxation, and you won't have a huge impact on government expenditure for extra welfare and rescue plans, like, for example, the $2.2 trillion plan to stimulate the economy, you wouldn't need that because the economy would be working. So you don't isolate. Everyone goes to work and it's all fine, everything as per normal. And you have these ideas playing off against each other, but this is consequentialist, right? This is not really using any other value system that I can really understand, or at least it's not obvious to me. So what's interesting is you get a lot of Republican, conservative, evangelical, Christian, theist Americans using consequentialism very, very overtly, and they're doing so in order to um, choose the option whereby the economy is the preferred value, almost over and above human life. So much so that a lieutenant governor, a Republican, said, and I quote, "My message: let's get back to work, let's get back to living, let's be smart about it, and those of us who are 70 plus will take care of ourselves. Don't sacrifice the country. Don't do that." Um, he was speaking to Tucker Carlson. Tucker, no one reached out to me and said, as a senior citizen, are you willing to take a chance on your survival in exchange for keeping the America that all America loves for your children and grandchildren? And if that's the exchange, I'm all in. That doesn't make me noble or brave or anything like that. I just think there are lots of grandparents out there in this country like me. So he's saying, I would rather die, and I would rather old people like me die than the economy suffer. So he's got this moral calculation of these two options, and he says, I would rather we sacrificed a load of people by not isolating them in order that we can oil the wheels of the economy. And that was really overt, and that's almost shocking because there's no sanctity of life there, and that's something you would expect theists to really believe in and to glorify the sanctity of life. I mean, it's almost a religious phrase, right? And yet it appears not important at all. It's a sacrifice of human life at the altar of capitalistic profiteering, and that is an absolutely stark view of the world. Now you could say that, okay, if you didn't oil the wheels of the capitalist machine, then people would not have money and people would die anyway. There would be suicide, lack of health, lack of this, lack of that, a lack of opportunity, blah blah blah, and it would be a terrible state of affairs. And so therefore it might be that, as Trump has, I think, explicitly said, you would get a smaller amount of people dying if you isolated and stopped the disease running rampant than you would if you just allowed everyone to carry on as normal. So more people would die as a result of, I don't know, economic recession and suicide and whatnot. And that's kind of insane thinking as far as I'm concerned. The sheer millions of people modelled to die if the US, for example, did nothing. At least I think 8 million plus. So we have to do these things that we're doing in order to stop those deaths. And if you had those deaths, the economy would just completely die anyway. And there's another interesting idea as well, and it's the idea that if we all go down and we all go down together, it's better. And by that I mean wealth is relative. So in the sense that, say America on its own got hit and the rest of the world were fine, actually that would be really bad for America economically, because America would go into a recession, but everyone else would do really well, and therefore competitively America would be screwed over for a long time to come. So if the whole world goes through an economic recession, I mean everyone, if everyone shuts down, it's better that everyone shuts down because it's all relative. And so therefore, if everyone's lost their jobs, or vast majority of people lost their jobs, then actually, if your next person's lost their job as well and the next person, you're in this together. And therefore governments and these social networks and social contracts and these the way that society works is that actually, if I'm bad and you're bad, we can be bad together and we lift it up together, uh, and we won't all be screwed basically. So there's some kind of safety in numbers approach to everyone being screwed, because if everyone's screwed, then relatively you're all in the same place, and actually you'll all be able to probably access and afford all the things you did before, because the prices are all relative, to do with supply and demand, and so on and so forth. It's a really big idea that takes a lot of unpacking, but very quickly it's better if we're all screwed rather than just some of us screwed. So yeah, that's my thought on that. That's just another little nugget to add at the end there. But anyway, my main point to make in this video is that it's weird that conservative religious types, particularly in America, will absolutely excoriate those who adhere to and believe in the moral value system of consequentialism and the system itself. And yet it appears that this is the bedrock foundation of their decision making at the moment. And I have on my blog, I have conservative theists who are explicitly endorsing consequentialist morality. I say explicitly, implicitly in what they're saying, but it's very explicit to me. And they probably don't realize themselves until I point it out and say, man, this is proper consequentialist. And it's really interesting because that's normally in our normal everyday discussions of morality, it's a moral value system that they absolutely detest, and very publicly so. And yet it's very obviously the moral value system that they are using to guide their policy decision making at the moment. Anyway, this has been a Tippling Philosopher. I'm Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This has been a little dip into the world of coronavirus as it pertains to morality, philosophy, and politics. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, either there or there, subscribe to my channel and put some comments down there. And stay safe, guys. Stay safe, because it is crazy out there. And the whole reason we do these things like isolation is so that we as a society remain safe. So, go for it.